A few days later, in the capital of the Flemish Empire, a fancy carriage stopped in front of a luxurious mansion. This was the Capella Manor. A servant came running and greeted Charlotte. The carriage door opened and Charlotte stepped out. A female servant stepped out and welcomed her. The male servant then said that their lord is waiting for her in the meeting. Charlotte coldly said that, "Go tell your lord that he doesn't need to wait for her, as she has something to do." The male servant became a bit embarrassed and said that the lord was really interested in her. Charlotte's eyes instantly became cold. The servant got scared and backed off. Charlotte then calls you and tells him to take Hilf and search for a place to rest. She would go right to Mr. Azerman's. She continued, before she returned he must try to keep his head down and not talk to anyone. But then she says never mind. She then asks the female servant if she could help them lead the way. After saying that, she goes away. You kept looking at her. The female servant then takes you and Hilf to where the meeting was there. The hall was decorated in a fancy way, but what caught the attention of the duo was delicious food. A noble woman looked towards you and Hilf and mumbled. Today the two masters of the Pollitt and Iz's families had not come, but some villagers dared to sneak in and begin to eat and drink. You and Hilf were enjoying the delicious food without paying attention to the woman's mumblings. All of a sudden, they hear a loud sound, waste. A middle-aged man kicked the servant girl from earlier. He shouted at her saying, "Why didn't she bring this care?" The girl with teary eyes wanted to refute. The other male servant then stepped up and said in a mocking tone, "Loina, why do you do this again and again? Why can't she complete a simple task given to her?" He pushed all his blame on her. At this moment you loudly says, "Hilf, this is called chewing," after saying that he gobbled up the piece of meat. It turns out he was teaching our little Hilf how to chew. The middle-aged man turned around and asked, why had he never seen these two characters? He frowned seeing those two, as they had a plate full of food, casual clothes, and didn't even have the slightest etiquette of eating. The man then confronts you and Hilf and introduces himself as Capella, the sponsor of this event. He then asks them if they had an invitation, as everyone here had one. You denies, saying he doesn't have one. The other noble families frowned upon seeing this and started whispering among themselves. Wend shouts and says to get out immediately if they don't have an invitation. Seeing the man shout at you, Hilf had charged her magical energy to attack the man. But you stopped her and said to Wend, there was a misunderstanding, he was here with Master Care Charlotte, that's why they had no invitation. Hearing this, the man was full of rage and shouted, "Nonsense, her Care is so beautiful and excellent, how could she accept him as a disciple?" You was surprised and asked your Care. The guests start discussing among themselves that Lord Wend had been pursuing Charlotte Care for a while, but she never responded to him. They even heard that Care took a male disciple recently, and Lord Wend was furious. One noble woman even said, this boy dug his own grave after saying that he was a disciple of the Flame Witch. You then calmly says to Wend, if he doesn't believe him then he could ask the butler next to him, as he went to greet them and Charlotte when they arrived. The butler was flustered but then said, it was a lie, it was not him who went there, instead it was Loina. When Capella got angry and shouted towards you, does he think he deserves Care? At this moment, a cold female voice was heard. It was Charlotte. She says, you was right. He was indeed her apprentice. Seeing Charlotte, the man's expression instantly changed and he said, in a polite manner, it turned out that he was really her apprentice. He then apologized for misunderstanding. He then said, as an apology, he would like to take Miss Care to see this year's magical achievements. Charlotte directly rejects him. She then held Yu's hand and said that she would see them with her fiancé. This thing came as a shocker to the man as he repeated with a trembling voice, fiancé. Charlotte then smiles and replied not only is he his apprentice, but also his fiancé. Even Yu was shocked hearing this and asked what was going on. Charlotte then slowly tells him This Wen couldn't get a girl, so he tried using his family's power to force her to marry him several times. Now that she has an opportunity, she would definitely use it. Even though Yu felt awkward, he still tried to act as much as he could. The man then said to his servant, it was a shame she used a poor civilian just to make him stop going after her. His servant then tells him to calm down, as today was the exchange meeting and important figures all over the kingdom were watching them. The servant then whispered he had heard that Charlotte didn't prepare anything to show for this conference today. Wen had a smile on his face after hearing this and said in a loud voice that he was trying to make everyone laugh a little, so he created a nice atmosphere. Now, he would present everyone the latest medicine he created. A bright blue liquid shined in a fancy bowl. The guests appreciated the medicine. Some said that the taste might be a bit bitter, but it made their body full of energy. Some said this was a magical medicine. The man then smirked and thanked everyone. He then said that this was the result of 1 year's worth of hard work from his Capella family. He then looked towards Care and said in a mocking tone, it was a shame that some people dared to join the exchange meeting just to drink and eat, without any research to share. Hearing all this, Yu dropped the cup of medicine. Wen was furious seeing his precious medicine being wasted. Yu then apologized in a mocking way, saying his hands were shaking. Charlotte laughed seeing this. Wen got angry and shouted, how dare he dump his meticulously prepared medicine? Did he even know how many precious herbs were used in there? Yu then calmly replied, vanilla, powder of flare stone, scales of dragon snake, lovage and pure water from under the ice field. The man was shocked hearing all the ingredients named because Yu was right. Yu then said he could make 8 or 10 bottles of this regular medicine in 1 day, and he was crying like a baby just because he wasted a small cup of it. Wen refuted, saying, this cup took him a whole month to prepare, and the effects were also excellent. How dare he claim that he could make 10 of those? He wanted to see if he could really do it. Seeing all this, Charlotte tells Yu to keep quiet, as she didn't want him to be embarrassed. He then whispered, asking her if she could help him in preparing this and this. Charlotte agreed amidst doubt. Suddenly, Charlotte asked how did he know so much about preparing medicine and its method. Yu was at a loss of words, and was thinking how to cover this up, when Hilf spoke, saying that it was she who told him quietly about all the ingredients. Charlotte began thinking it was possible. After all, Hilf was once the sword of the King of Elements, and it was not surprising for her to know the ingredients of this medicine. Yu on the other side was congratulating Hilf for telling her first lie. Yu stood in front of the table to prepare the medicine. Wen then mocked him, saying, cilantro, turnips, leaf flowers, 300 grass. He got so many things from the market. Was he planning to create a medicine or cook for them? All the guests started laughing hearing that. Yu smiled seeing this and started preparing the medicine. He was doing everything proper: fire control, wire drawing, and was cooking perfectly. Smelling the aroma, the nobles felt being one with nature. It made them relaxed and happy. Wen, on the other hand, went from being surprised to being shocked, because this man wasn't cooking, he was creating medicines in a unique way. All the guests were shocked seeing the way he prepared them. He poured the clean blue shining medicine inside a glass bottle. Yu informed everyone that the medicine was ready. All of a sudden, a man stepped out of the crowd and asked if he could have the chance to taste the potions made by him. Charlotte instantly recognized seeing the man, as he was Master Madsen. He was the master of Empire Magical Pharmacy, and was as famous as the chief magician Azermans. Yu then says he could taste it. The man drank a mouthful of medicine, and suddenly exclaimed he didn't expect to see someone make a perfect magical potion in his lifetime. This magical potion even increased his mental power. Wen then shouted it was impossible, as the magic elixir which could increase the mental power had been lost for nearly 300 years. Madsen then said with an excited tone that this medicine refining technique was unheard of, and he couldn't figure out how he did it. If it was possible, he would like to ask him to teach this technique, and he would hand over half his assets to Yu. Yu began thinking, half of the assets. Madsen continued. If he was not satisfied then, he could give him more. The guests became shocked hearing this. All of a sudden, when Capella said in a loud voice, "Then my Capella family also wants to buy this magic elixir recipe with half of their assets." Madsen was furious hearing this. Wen thought his Capella family had more assets than Madsen, so this offer was impossible to refuse. Yu then said he didn't plan to sell to any of them. He then says to Charlotte that they should go now. Suddenly Wen said he would give half of his assets plus a share of the profit from the medicine sold. Yu stopped and slowly said, although he didn't want this money, but it was too much. Even Hilf was too excited as this much money was no joke. Charlotte was at a loss of words. After some time in the conference room of the Capella mansion, a butler handed over the money promised in a magic spatial ring and also said the share from the pharmacy after selling the elixir would be sent to his account every year. Wen then excitedly asked, what was the secret of the elixir? Yu then replied, the energy contained in the magic elixir never came from the ingredients, but from the elements in the air. Wen was shocked hearing this. Yu continued, the inside of the pot was carved with a magic array that could condense the elements of the air. And the use of advanced fire magic could catalyze the resonance of the ingredients and magic arrays. As for the materials, the concentration of elements contained in the low-level ingredients was too low. But under the effect of the magic array it would form element penetration with the high concentration elements accumulated in the air. Therefore low-grade materials not only enhance the effect of coalescence, but also act as a medium for elements in the air, while high-grade materials do the opposite. Hearing to the secret of the potion, Wen was excited. Charlotte then said, now that Master Wen knew the mystery of the elixir, they would take their leave. The man then tells her to wait and asked if they had heard about the recent eruption of the Larda Volcano. Charlotte replied, saying that she had heard about it, and it was only a natural incident. Wen smiled and continued, at first the people he sent also thought the same way, until they accidentally found the traces of rare monsters and fiery unicorns deep inside the volcanic cave. Charlotte was shocked hearing this. Although Yu was confused, he still asked, the fiery unicorn were rare in the eastern continent, how could it appear in the western continent? Wen replied saying even though he had no idea why it appeared here, it was certain that this unicorn was guarding a jade burning fire. Yu asked what this jade burning fire was. The man then said, it is a treasure of heaven and earth in the legend of the eastern mainland. So they were now preparing a team to seize the gem. He then asked if Miss Care wanted to participate. He even added a condition. After this event was completed, the unicorn would belong to them and the treasure would belong to him. Charlotte agreed and asked when would the team start. Wen said they would start 3 days from now, and for the time being, they could stay in the Capella's mansion. He was also looking forward to this expedition, as he felt curious towards this burning fire jade. After a while, Wen was sitting alone in the room. The butler then asked with a worried voice, Master, you used half of the property to buy the prescription medicine, that the kid could pass out at any time. You even told them about the fiery unicorn. What's going on? Wen smirked and said, I only promised to take them, but I didn't say that I will bring them back. The butler, hearing the answer, instantly became happy. On the other side, a female servant introduced Charlotte and company to a room. After they entered the room, Yu asked Charlotte why she was so interested in the fiery unicorn. Charlotte then said it was because the blood of a unicorn's heart could transform the fire of the magic wizard into a fire that could purify everything. Drinking it would awaken her magic talent. She then said he might have already guessed it, but she accepted him as her disciple, hoping that he could help her successfully subdue the fiery unicorn. She then apologized and asked Yu if she was too selfish. Yu then replied saying, indeed it was quite selfish. Hearing this, Charlotte was shocked, but Yu continued, selfish people never give any choices, they take everything they want, and he liked those kind of people. That's why he would take both, the fiery unicorn and the treasure. Hearing her disciples say all this made her blush, and she says, the day they set off for the volcano was near, and he couldn't even condense any elemental magic powers. To prevent him from getting in trouble, she would temporarily add magic to him through contract engraving. Yu was surprised hearing this. Charlotte then instructed him to sit near her and light up his forehead mark. Yu lighted his mark. All of a sudden, Charlotte bumped his head on her thigh, where her contract mark was there. She started chanting magic spells, even though her whole face was red. After a while, the spell got completed. She explained to Yu that this was the ancient way that uses supplement magic power. Now that he had absorbed her magic, he could also release magic. He could try now. But no reply came from Yu. Charlotte got worried seeing this and asked if he was okay. Days went by. In another room, Wen frowned and asked his servant, so they were staying in the guest room all these days and didn't come out. The servant laughed and said he even had some panting noises in the room. Wen slapped the desk and shouted to stop talking. He loudly said, "You will regret it later, remember this." All of a sudden a calm voice sounded in the room. "Lord Wen, why are you so angry?" Wen instantly became docile and hurriedly apologized for being rude. This mysterious man was Voidwalker Haston. He was one of the 4 ace masters of the Flemish Empire. He was known as the first person in the history of mankind to set foot in the Void world. He then calmly said, "Did you ask me to come, just to take care of those two?" On the other side, somewhere in the Capella Manor, "You had a flame on his hand and asked like that?" Charlotte then said, now he could successfully cast the elemental magic in his body. Yu was excited and thought now he could hide his fiery magic without revealing it. Charlotte then said in a serious tone, "In case of an accident when subduing the unicorn, the magic I added in you should be enough to resist a deadly attack. So remember to save a little bit of it." But then she heard Yu saying, "Look, Master Fiery Love." Charlotte got angry seeing Yu waste her magic power. After a while, a maid knocked on the door and informed them that the carriage was ready and it was time to set off. Charlotte opened the door and said understood. All of a sudden, she sensed someone's presence. She went there to check it out, but couldn't find anyone. She mumbled that person looked like Haston. Yu was confused and asked what happened. Charlotte then said it was nothing and they should now leave. Charlotte thought that might be an illusion. It was nighttime. In another part of the capital, in the Magic Academy, a figure cloaked in black was running when she suddenly found herself trapped. Footsteps echoed and a lot of people came running. They shouted, "She's here." Vice Principal Claire coldly says, "It seems you have no way to escape, so return the stolen goods now." Claire then chanted her magic spell, Soul Chain. Magic chains came at fast speed towards the cloaked figure. The figure smiled and dodged it. It then broke the glass window and jumped. Claire gritted her teeth and said she escaped. The figure hid itself in a safe location and panted, as it was very exhausted. It then removed the mask covering its face. Turns out this cloaked figure was Elsa. She sighed and said, "I finally got it." On the other side, near the volcanic mountains, many carriages were moving at fast speed. A person shouted stop and the main carriage stopped. The people in it were frustrated, as this was not the first time the carriage stopped in the journey. A boy hurriedly came out of the carriage. This boy was Yu. Wen then looked towards Yu, who was barfing, and asked Charlotte why she didn't inform him earlier that he had motion sickness. Originally it was one-day journey, but because of him, it took them more time. Charlotte then said, sorry, she didn't expect him to have motion sickness because of the bumpy road. Maybe he might have never experienced such situation before. Yu was exhausted from vomiting again and again and thought he would never take this kind of carriage anymore. All of a sudden they heard a loud noise as they all turned. They saw one of their magicians running towards them at full speed, and behind him were some wind lizards. Wen, shouted at him for being scared of just a few wind lizards, even though he was a high-level magician. The man was terrified and said, "But there were so many of them." Charlotte looked towards the wind lizard. You also looked with interest towards the herd of wind lizard that was coming. Wen became angry because more of their magicians were bringing the herd of monsters towards them. The wind lizard was a medium low-level monster. It was fast, and its venomous teeth was troublesome. Wen then said, although this kind of lizard wasn't dangerous by itself, but the number was too large, and it would take time and effort to kill them. They needed to save as much energy as possible before killing the unicorn. The man then shouts and tells everyone to board the carriage quickly as they were going to escape from here without fighting the lizards. At this moment, one of the magicians shouted with an astonished voice, "Lord, look at the boy." The man turned around, and what he saw made us aghast. The king of the lizard was licking you lovingly. Everyone was shocked, and Wen asked Charlotte if her fiancé knew the lizard king. Charlotte denied it and said, it was just that he was a little more approachable to the summoning beasts and the monster than the average person. The people there were speechless, because what this called little approachable, the lizard king was licking him like he found its wife. Wen then requests you to ask if the lizards could let them continue their journey. You then says he thought of a much better way. After a while, everyone was sitting on one wind lizard, and you sat on the lizard king. When asked was this the better way, he said earlier. You then agrees as this was faster and much more convenient. You was happy as he didn't have to go in that carriage anymore, which was the reason for his barfing. Charlotte smiled seeing you being happy. After some time the party had reached Larda Volcano. They then enter a cave where they had found the unicorn earlier. The lizard king roared looking towards the cave. You then thought there must be something inside the cave. He thanks the lizard king and tells him to leave quickly as things were going to get ugly here. The whole group entered the cave. Wen was thinking he never expected this kid to have such a high affinity with monsters, but even if he and Care subdued the unicorn, they would not survive today. Finally, they had reached the exit of the cave. They were shocked and surprised after seeing a river of lava flow inside the cave, and even more after spotting the jade. You suddenly felt that the magical wave emitted by the jade was familiar to him. Wen then walked towards the jade to take it away before the fire unicorn arrived. All of a sudden, Charlotte stopped him from touching the jade. At this moment, a ball of huge fire erupted from inside the river of lava. Then it finally landed in front of Wen. The monster roared. This monster was a rare monster and was called the fiery unicorn. This monster was from the eastern continent and excelled in fire attacks. The magicians became ready to fight the unicorn. Charlotte then tells you to stand behind her and wait for the right moment to use his taming magic on the unicorn, after they weaken it. You then thought that taming this beast was very difficult, and if he took it down in an instant, it would arouse suspicion, so the best thing to do was to stand aside and wait. Wen was terrified and quickly instructed them to get rid of it. The fight started as the magicians rained down ice magic. They created ice walls to contain the beast. But the beast's heat was so fierce that it melted down all the ice. The magicians in return faced a backlash and started coughing up blood. The unicorn charged towards the magicians, but Charlotte blocked the unicorn's charge with her magic fiery sword. As the attacks collided, there was a huge explosion and Charlotte was sent flying backwards. She was injured. As the impact of the explosion was too much for the rocks to contain, they broke and the jade flew towards the river of lava. Everyone got worried seeing this. But before the jade could fall inside the lava, you caught it and brought it back. Everyone was amazed by his skill. Charlotte then tells you not to hold it as it was burning with flames and you would get injured. You then calmly said that this was not a gem from the start, instead it was. But before he could complete his sentence, a portal opened from behind him and huge tentacles came from inside towards him and Charlotte. You got alert and pushed away Charlotte from its path. The tentacles wrapped around you and took him away into the portal. Charlotte shouted Yu's name, but he had already disappeared. The unicorn was also wrapped around by the tentacles, but it didn't go inside the portal. At this moment, Charlotte realized that this was Hastings' void realm. Went hurriedly ordered the magicians to attack the unicorn. Ice needles went at sharp speed and pierced the unicorn. Charlotte then said in an angry tone, "What was this all about?" Wen then laughed and said she was really naive to believe that he would work with her. Moreover, she promised to marry him, but now she was going back on her words. Well, anyways, his Capella family was always suppressed by that old Azerman. It was about time to settle the matter. Charlotte gritted her teeth and recalled the guy she saw in the hallway was really Hastings. Charlotte was full of rage and said, if anything were to happen to her apprentice, none of them would leave this place alive. At this moment, the same portal opened in front of her. Hastings stepped out of it and said, it was a pity, as her apprentice was probably Lord's food by now in his void realm. Hearing those words, Charlotte trembled. She remembered the time she spent with you. Her eyes burned with hatred towards Hastings. She attacked him with all her magic power, but as Hastings was leagues above her, he opened his void gate and swallowed the whole attack. But that was just the start. He then reflected that attack towards her. As she was taken by surprise, she couldn't completely dodge it and was injured severely. Hastings then said void magic was not a part of the normal magic, and even the super magus red sword couldn't stop it, let alone she. He then advised her to give up. At this moment, Juan and his underlings had perverted smiles and requested Hastings to give her to them, so they could enjoy her before he kills her. Charlotte gritted her teeth and thought, according to what Hastings said, if even the super magic of the red sword couldn't stop him, then only one method was left. Charlotte ran towards the unicorn. Juan got terrified and shouted towards Hastings that if he doesn't stop her now, then she would take the blood of the fiery unicorn to awaken her magical talent. Hastings smiled and said, not to worry, as she was just wasting her time. Charlotte kneeled in front of the dying unicorn and requested for its help and drank its blood. All of a sudden, she felt unprecedented pain in her body. It was like she was burning. Hastings laughed and said, she was really stupid. Did she really believe what that old fool Azerman said? She would be burnt alive after drinking the unicorn's blood. Charlotte clutched her chest and said her teacher would never lie to her. Hastings smirked and said she really knew nothing about him. He then instructs Wand and others to move, as there was no need to kill her, since the raging skyfire would detonate inside her, and she would explode. Charlotte, even though was in tremendous pain, still endured because her eyes burned for revenge. Her rage had kept her sanity back. At this moment, she burnt fiercely, and from within her emitted terrifying amount of magical fire energy. It was many times stronger than the unicorn. She had now awakened her magical talent, 1,000 flames awakening. Seeing this, Hastings and company stopped in shock. Charlotte's eyes were moist with tears. She said, even though she awakened the magical talent, she was not happy, because the one who she didn't want to lose was her silly apprentice. And they took it away from him. She would never forgive them. As hatred burned within her, she condensed her fire magic, and the temperature started to increase. Hastings quickly casted his void realm, but it was of no use, as it didn't activate. He was shocked. At this moment, Charlotte's spell was completed, and a fire dragon emerged from there. It looked vicious and emitted terrifying amount of heat. Everyone trembled in front of the mighty dragon, and finally the attack landed on them. As if earth burst in flames, the whole cave shook, and when the explosion resided, there laid Hastings and group. Some were dead, some were alive but unconscious, but among them one thing was common, that was, each and every one was gravely injured. As Hastings laid there injured, he still couldn't believe someone to have mastered fire magic to this extent. She then landed on the ground with a sad expression. At this moment, she heard clapping noise. She then turned around and saw her teacher, Azerman's. She was surprised and asked why he was here, and why he looked so weird. The old man ignored the question and asked in an excited voice, so she had finally awakened her magic talent. Hastings then laughed and said, Didn't she understand it yet? This old immortal Aesmans had his sights set on her, from the beginning to the day she finally awakened her magic talent. After all, he was the devil of plunder. Charlotte was confused and couldn't understand what he said. At this moment she remembered something. Legend has it that there was a monster that could take away other people's talents and magic. It appeared 500 years ago. In the first 2 years in which he appeared in human history, he was not defeated even once. But in the historical record he disappeared after the battle against the seventh apostle Celia in the war. It was even rumored that he was dead, but how could it be Mr. Aesmans? The old man then spoke calmly. Care, I was honest with you when I said that if you awakened your magic talent, you can help me a lot. That's exactly what's happening now. I'll just take your magic talent directly. Hearing this, Charlotte trembled. She couldn't believe her ears. Aesmans raised his hand and the girl came flying in his grip. She asked why he was doing this. The old man laughed and said, if he wasn't expecting that she would awaken the Lord of Flame's talent. Did she really think he would adopt her so kindly? He then looked at her and sighed. She looked so pitiful. He tells her that her existence was only to awaken the magic talent for him to take it. The old man extracts all her magic talent into himself. Charlotte had tears in her eyes. In one day she lost everything, her beloved disciple, and now even the teacher she believed in betrayed her. She stopped struggling and closed her eyes. Aesmans threw her away and felt the fire power burn in him. He really liked this overpowered talent. After that he looked towards the unconscious Charlotte and said, now that he had extracted her talent, there was no use keeping her alive. Haston, on the other hand, gritted his teeth because he knew, after dealing with Charlotte, he would come for him. He was still thinking why his void realm was not responding. At this moment there was a crack in space, and the crack continued, till the whole dimension cracked. And from within these cracks emerged you. He threw a piece of flesh on the ground. The old man was shocked seeing this, as this boy in front of him had killed the absolute master of the void realm, the Void Lord. You then angrily kicked away the flesh and said, the octopus has so many tentacles, it took him some time to deal with it. You then looked in front and saw Charlotte lying gravely injured. An eerie energy leaked from him and he asked calmly, who did this? The old man smiled and said, he was the one who did it. He then kicked her and her body bounced towards you. He calmly asked, so you even took away her magic talent? The old man then said, he should be proud as his master sacrificed herself for him, in order to destroy the apostles. The old man continued, when I was fighting with Celia 300 years ago, I realized that even with the usual magic of a talented magician, we can't beat the apostles. Even if there were many, I needed more strength, and for that I had to collect all kinds of high-level talents and power left by the apostles. I had hidden my identity and worked so hard for many years, and even I adopted her. Until today, I finally have both Skyfire and Hellfire. In the future, I will be able to beat the apostles. He starts laughing manically. You kneeled down and wiped the tear falling down from her eyes. Yu's eyes went emotionless as he stood up. The old man then said, now that he had the Skyfire, he would make both of them disappear. The old man then attacked you with just that simple ball of fire. But that ball of fire increased its size as it reached you and became a sea of fire. You calmly slashed the wave of fire with his green sword hilt. The fire wave was cut in two, and it was easily extinguished. Haston slowly got up and mumbled, could this guy really be Charlotte's disciple? But he was so much stronger than her. The old man was surprised and complimented you, that he was much better than those trash Pollitt family, as he could actually exert the real power of the green sword. He then suddenly asked, who was he? You ignored his question and charged towards him. Aesmans chanted a magical earth spells and the rocks came as spikes towards you. You destroyed everything in its path and continued his charge. The broken fragments of rocks were sent flying towards Aesmans, but he protected himself with a magic barrier. You finally reached Aesmans and his attack collided with the barrier. There was a loud explosion, and the rocks inside the cave started falling. Haston slowly got up and thought if this went on then the volcano would erupt soon. Haston gritted his teeth and cursed his luck to be stuck here between the two monsters Yu and Aesmund's fight. He knew that no matter who won, they won't let him go. On the other side, Aesmund coughed up blood and was injured. Yu said in a cold voice, "To return Care's magic talent." The old man maniacally laughed and said, "The talent taken away by his skill to plunder cannot be given back." And did he really think that he could beat him? The old man then took up the purple flame vial and crushed it. Haston, seeing this, was shocked, because that was the legendary apostle's hellfire. Just what was Aesmund trying to do? Aesmund started burning with purple flames. He shouted, this was the most powerful apostolic force he had collected so far. He would let him experience its greatness today. The purple flames spread out and burned all the bodies on the ground. As the flames were coming towards you, Hilf came to her human shape and used wind barrier to block the attack. The purple flames collided with her barrier, but couldn't advance. You then calmly instructed her to leave this place and take Charlotte with her. Hilf denied, saying that it was her duty to protect him, and she won't leave her alone. You patted her head and said she knew who he was and what he was capable of, so why was she worrying? Hearing this, Hilf calmed down and took Charlotte and left the battle scene. Aesmund laughed seeing this, because for the first time did he see someone let their weapon run first during the battle. He then said it didn't matter, as in front of absolute power all of these tricks were useless. His purple flame burnt even brighter. He laughed and continued, after living for 500 years in this world, I finally got rid of the shackles of humanity and embarked on the path of becoming an apostle. You coldly said, you don't know how to use this ignition. At this moment did the old man realize that the purple flames were not burning you. Instead, you was controlling them. He then made all the flames disappear. Aesmund, seeing this, was terrified, because no human could control this fire, as it was too strong for them to handle. He asked in a trembling voice, "Who are you?" The boy then laughed and said, "He is just a little boy." You then says, he would like to know how he was going to pay back for what he did to his fiancée. The old man then said, the moment he planned to take a talent, she was already a dead person in his eyes. He then thought, if this boy had the power to control the hellfire, as long as he captures him and plunders his power, he would be able to fully control it. The old man then shouted plunder, and the hellfire power started getting absorbed from you to the old man. The old man laughed and said, in this world there was no need for a second person who could use hellfire. All of a sudden, while he was absorbing Yu's power, he could see his memories. The moment he saw them, he became petrified. Yu smirked and calmly said, "Oops, you caught me. You know, in order to not be exposed, I was trying to hide my strength for so long." The old man was terrified. He now realized who the entity in front of him was. Yu then said, if he wanted his power so much, then he would be generous and give it to him. Yu's voice changed, and a majestic voice resounded. The first seal, open. Terrifying amount of magic energy started to flood towards Aesmund's. This energy was so dense that in front of it the old man's energy felt like a knot. The old man's body began overloading with magic energy. He then said in a scared voice, I never thought you are. But before he could complete his sentence, Yu smiled and shushed him. He then said he was just a little guy who came to find a wife and get some gold coins. Aesmund's body couldn't handle the magical energy and exploded. Now that he had taken care of the annoying things, Yu planned to go outside the cave to meet up with Hilf and Charlotte. But before going, he had to do something. Yu turned around and saw the unicorn nailed by the ice spears. He went there and removed them with his magic. The unicorn fell down and slowly groaned in pain. Yu then asked him that he didn't release all his strength in the previous battle because he was afraid that the impact of the force would be too great and would hurt her child. Yu took out the gem, which in reality was the unicorn's egg, and put it near the dying unicorn. But the unicorn pushed it towards Yu. Yu understood that it wanted him to take care of it. He smiled and said, As this egg had the aura of an apostle, it was destined to be related to them, the apostles. Yu then tells her not to worry as he would take good care of it. The unicorn had a satisfied expression as she took her last breath. The cave was shaking and would soon break. Hilf was outside the cave but had a worried expression, but soon became happy after seeing Yu come out of it. Yu then asked how was Charlotte. Hilf replied with a sad expression that she wasn't awake yet. She was too tired and was in coma. Yu sighed and said, now that the volcano was about to erupt, leaving this place should be their first priority. Yu was thinking, even though Care had a strong personality, could she really accept all this after waking up? Care was in coma, but remembered everything about her life. She was dreaming of the past, her childhood when she was in a hospital. The nurses discussed that Charlotte's family was destroyed by the apostles. Everyone discussed saying that they were too good at fire magic, so they got destroyed. Only this poor child was left. At this moment an old man stepped inside the room and said, looks like you already know who killed your loved one, and I have the same goal as you. If you want revenge, be my apprentice. Little Charlotte asked who he was, and the man introduced himself as Asmans, the chief magician of the imperial family. At that time she really believed him and thought he would help her get revenge. But who would have thought that it was just a cover-up of the Lord of Evil, to take away her magic talent? Charlotte apologized to her parents as she couldn't complete her revenge and would see them very soon. All of a sudden, she felt very cold. On the other side, Hilf hurriedly said she couldn't feel any magic from Master Care, and even her energy was rapidly depleting. The next day, in a hotel, Yu was using his magic energy to sustain her, as she was losing all her energy. If this continued, she might never wake up. At this moment, Hilf asked if he still had the magic that Master Care gave him. Yu then thought if he could return the power to its owner, it could help her reassemble the magic. It was not enough to restore to her former strength, but still it's better than nothing. Hilf then said as Master Care had no magic in her body, so he couldn't transmit his power to her by engraving it. He would have to use the most traditional method, that was kissing. Yu was flustered after hearing the word kissing. But if it could help save her, he would do it. But then again he asked Hilf, wasn't it taking advantage of Master? But Hilf consoles her saying that she would never care for something as small as kiss, and it was more important to save her. Hilf then goes away to guard the front door. As they were alone in the room, Yu then gently kisses her. Charlotte's magic power gets transferred back to her from Yu. Charlotte slowly opened her eyes and thought this was a dream, as Yu was long gone. But when she finally opened her eyes, she was shocked as this was not a dream. She immediately gave a bump on Yu's head. She blushed and shouted, did he really think he was her fiancé just because she told to act earlier? She then tells Yu to forget what happened here. Even though Charlotte was angry, she was happy to see Yu alive. That's all for today's video. Write in the comments, which character did you dislike the most in this whole series?